Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the worn leather shoes, well, probably just calloused bare feet, of a medieval peasant. Picture this. The scent of fresh-turned earth still clings to you. Your tunic sticks to your back with dried sweat, and the cow has knocked over the water bucket again. But for once, you're not moving. You're not plowing, not weaving, not hauling a cart full of turnips across uneven ground. No. You're doing something miraculous, something sacred in its own muddy little way. Absolutely nothing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because despite everything, the plague, the drafty cottages, the total lack of dental care, there's something unexpected about your medieval life. You actually have free time. A lot more than you'd think. Forget the myth of endless toil from dawn to dusk. 365 days a year. Your calendar isn't ruled by deadlines or quarterly reviews. It's carved out by saints' days, feast days, fast days, and seasonal lulls. Some years you'll work fewer than 150 days. And that's official. Historians still argue whether this counted minor feast days or just the big ones. But the takeaway is the same. You're probably clocking fewer hours than your great-great-great descendant hunched in front of a spreadsheet. You, instead, are hunched over an ale bench beside your neighbors. Because now that the hay's been gathered, the barley's been threshed, and the sheep have mostly stopped wandering into the privy, it's time to unwind. Not with Netflix, not with a phone, obviously, but with something better, or weirder, or just flat-out dangerous. Let's start with the vibe. The village green is packed. Chickens wander freely between benches. Someone's playing a lute badly. Someone else is yelling at a goose. You're seated on a log with a wooden mug of something that tastes like vinegar and mushrooms, but it's fermented, and that's what counts. The church bell has rung to signal the end of harvest, and no one's going to work tomorrow. You've survived another season. That's worth celebrating. A neighbor offers you a bit of coarse bread still warm from the communal oven. Kids are chasing each other with sticks. Someone's trying to juggle apples and failing miserably. And then someone suggests a game. Now, this isn't game night with neatly printed cards and plastic dice. This is medieval game night, which means things will probably break. Furniture, ribs, or both. The local priest might disapprove, but he's too busy pretending not to watch while sipping wine behind a tree. You've got options. You could test your skill in Skittles, which is basically bowling with crooked wooden pins and a lopsided ball someone carved from an old cheese wheel. Or you could join a makeshift wrestling match, which mostly involves two drunk farmers rolling around in cabbage leaves while their wives cheer sarcastically. Or maybe, if you're feeling bold, you gather with the other young folk at the edge of the square where the real chaos is brewing. Mob football practice. Practice in this context means someone's brought out a pig's bladder and dares the crowd to get it to the far end of the green without dying. But more on that later. Today, your personal entertainment is simpler. You're sitting beside Marjorie, the blacksmith's niece, and she's been giving you sidelong glances all evening. She's already beaten 3 men at arm wrestling and insulted the Reeves haircut. So naturally, you're smitten. You hand her the last of your fermented turnip cider, and she raises an eyebrow. Not a smile, but not a smile either. You're pretty sure it's a sign. Then come the musicians, or rather, one man with a tin whistle and 2 others banging spoons on a bucket. Everyone begins to stomp their feet in rhythm, the dirt kicking up in little clouds. Children form a circle for a ring game. The sun dips behind the thatched rooftops, and lanterns flicker to life, tallow candles in jars, casting smoky halos over the gathering. And amid all this, it becomes clear. Life is harsh, brutal even, but not all the time. There are moments like these, wedged between famine and taxation, where joy grows stubbornly like a weed between cobblestones. You dance badly. You laugh too hard. You fall over in the mud and blame the cider. Tomorrow, your legs will ache and your head might spin. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you have stories to tell. Mud in your ears, and a splinter in your thumb that kind of looks like a saint's finger if you squint. And that's enough. You look up at the stars, clearer than they ever are now, since there are no street lamps, no electric haze, just the cold, brilliant sweep of the night sky and the echo of a tune in your ear. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll try your hand at archery, or risk your pride at apple bobbing, or throw dice in the alehouse. But tonight you're free, and free time in your world is more precious than gold leaf or Latin books or shoes that match. So you stretch your legs, lift your mug, and breathe in the mingled scent of fire smoke, damp wool, and roasted turnips. You made it through another season. That's more than enough reason to celebrate. You wake to the sound of chickens arguing under your window, and the lingering smell of dried cider clinging to your clothes. Your head is pounding slightly from last night's fermented festivities, but there's a whisper of excitement in the air, because today, your village is setting up one of its most ridiculous and strangely romantic traditions, the apple game. Bobbing for apples, you might think, is something best left to awkward Halloween parties with plastic tubs and children in sticky costumes. But here in your thatch-roofed world, it's far more serious. This is romance. This is mysticism. This is competitive tooth-based matchmaking. By midday, a wooden trough is hauled to the center of the green and filled with cool well water. Women gather on one side, young men on the other, all trying to look disinterested while very much interested. You blend into the crowd as someone begins dropping apples into the water, each fruit inscribed with the name of a village bachelor. Scratched faintly into the peel, with a knife, you spot Edward, Tom, and, of course, Big Martin, who is neither big nor particularly charming, but owns 2 pigs and a suspiciously dry roof. Marjorie elbows you in the ribs. "Yours isn't in there," she mutters with a grin. You shrug, acting casual while checking if she's already bobbed. She hasn't. Good. The rules are simple. A girl steps up, leans over the trough, and tries to catch an apple in her teeth. No hands, of course. If she succeeds on the first attempt, the superstition says she's fated to marry that boy. A second try? The stars are murky. A third? Best not talk about it. Most girls give up after 2 tries anyway. Dignity only stretches so far. The moment arrives. Marjorie walks forward. She squints at the floating apples, clearly targeting one. You lean forward, silently rooting for it to be yours. She plunges her head into the trough, water splashing up around her ears. There's a collective inhale from the crowd. A moment passes, then she emerges, dripping, triumphant, with an apple clutched between her teeth. She spits it into her hand. The name carved faintly into the skin is Tom. You feel your stomach drop like a sack of turnips down a well. But then she shrugs, casually tosses the apple to the ground, and walks back past you without a word. Later, you find out she secretly swapped it for the one with your name and tucked it under her pillow. Dream rituals, after all, matter more than public performance. Yes, placing the apple beneath one's pillow is part of the game too. Legend has it, the sleeper will dream of their future spouse. And while historians still argue whether this tradition had deeper pagan roots or was simply a creative excuse for pre-modern flirtation, it's held strong in your village for generations. That's not to say the game doesn't have risks. The water's cold. The tub is often reused from livestock washing, and you've heard tales of someone nearly drowning once. Of course, it was just Edwin, who tripped over his own feet and fell in backward, but the story has grown in the telling. Still, the apple game is one of the highlights of the year. It's the perfect blend of absurdity and sincerity, public performance and private hope. You remember last year when Agnes bit into 2 apples by accident and claimed she was destined to marry brothers. She's still single. Even the elders gather to watch, cackling from the benches while recalling their own soggy romantic exploits. One old woman swears she dreamt of her late husband before she ever knew him. Another claims she bit into an apple and saw a goat, then married the man who owned it. Coincidence? Maybe. But in a world without dating apps or scented letters, you take signs where you can get them. And if you're wondering what happens to all the bitten apples afterward, well, they're not eaten. That would be deeply unlucky. Some are left on windowsills to rot, absorbing moonlight. Some are buried in the garden for fertility. Some are forgotten and rediscovered weeks later, moldy and shriveled like shrunken heads. A few end up being eaten by goats, who presumably gain insight into human romance in the process. You pass the rest of the day with sticky faces and wet sleeves, watching as person after person gives the apple bob a go. Some cheer, some sigh. One girl sneezes and takes the tub down with her, dousing everyone nearby. As dusk falls, the trough is tipped over, the water flooding into the grass, trailing sodden apple skins across the earth like confetti after a very specific kind of party. The music starts up again. You find yourself next to Marjorie, who is carefully not looking at you. You're about to speak when she glances sideways and says, "Don't get cocky. I just like apples." You grin. She grins back. Somewhere behind you, someone starts shouting about mob football tomorrow. The bruises you remember are worth it, but that's a story for the next day. Tonight, the scent of wet apples and cheap ale follows you home. The stars are out again. You lie in bed and wonder, idly, if Marjorie really did keep that apple. And if she dreams of you tonight, or maybe of Tom, the unlucky bloke with the cider cart and 2 teeth. You'll know soon enough. The morning arrives with a chill and the distant thud of someone already shouting about team names. Your joints ache, not from labor, but from anticipation. Today is football day. Mob football, to be precise. And you're going to play, which, statistically speaking, means you're also going to get at least mildly maimed. You drag yourself out of bed, splash your face with a bucket of what could generously be called water, and step outside into the rising energy of a village gearing up for the most chaotic sport ever conceived by people who had no concept of shin guards or medical insurance. There are no uniforms. There are no referees. There is only one ball, if you can call a bloated pig's bladder a ball, and 2 vague objectives. Get it to the other end of town, or better yet, to the church in the neighboring village, by any means necessary. Mob football isn't a casual kickabout. It's a barely controlled riot with occasional scoring. Entire towns can join in. Sometimes it's 20 players, sometimes 200. Sometimes it's just whoever's available, including the baker's apprentice with a twisted ankle and the priest who insists he's only watching. He won't be. Your team assembles on one end of the village green. The other team huddles near the smithy. The ball is held aloft by a boy who seems far too proud of this moment. He throws it into the air, and just like that, you're off. You run, you duck, you shoulder past a farmer twice your size. Someone grabs your sleeve, someone else grabs your leg. The ball vanishes beneath a pile of writhing bodies. You're pretty sure someone bites someone else. You push, crawl, and emerge gasping for air, gripping the bladder like it owes you money. A roar goes up. The crowd begins to surge toward the edge of the village. The other team is reforming. You toss the bladder to a teammate. Well, to someone nearby who seems to be running in the same direction. Close enough. There are no real rules. You can't punch, technically, but you can accidentally elbow someone in the ribs or tackle them into a puddle. You're not supposed to break bones, but it happens. The goal isn't a net or a painted line. It's the other village's church door, or their barn, or, in some versions, a bucket someone places on a distant fence post. It changes depending on who's loudest. And while it might seem like utter chaos, and it absolutely is, there's still something almost elegant about it. The flow of the mob, the momentum, the brief alliances and betrayals, all swirl together into a kind of muddy ballet. A ballet with shouting. And mud in places mud shouldn't be. Historians still argue whether mob football was a genuine community bonding ritual or just a socially sanctioned excuse for violence. Probably both. Some scholars suggest the game had ancient pagan roots, a symbolic struggle between fertility and decay. Others think it was simply what happened when you gave peasants too much cider and not enough hobbies. Kings, for their part, hated it. Repeatedly. Monarchs in both England and France issued decrees banning the game, sometimes on the grounds that it distracted men from military archery practice, sometimes just because people kept dying. But the bans never stuck. Try telling an entire village they can't chase a pig bladder across a field while screaming like banshees. It's not going to work. You once saw the Reeve, an uptight man known for lecturing people about not trimming hedges on feast days, accidentally get pulled into the scrum and emerge with his tunic ripped and a wild, joyous gleam in his eye. He hasn't spoken of it since. Today, the match lasts hours. At one point, the ball ends up in the river, and you all have to dive in after it. At another point, a cow wanders onto the field and is politely played around, then not so politely tackled when someone mistakes it for an opponent. In the end, your team wins. Kind of. The bladder makes it to the church. 3 windows are broken. Someone's cart is on fire. The priest is limping, but there's cheering, laughter, and a general consensus that we'll fix it later. You stagger away from the field, soaked, bruised, and grinning like a fool. Your shirt is torn. You've lost a shoe. But you still have all your teeth, which is more than Cedric can say. He's spitting something out into a ditch and waving triumphantly. As you limp back towards your cottage, your body buzzing with pain and adrenaline, you feel something you rarely do during planting season, alive and absurdly proud. Later, you sit beside Marjorie again, who eyes your bruised arm with mock sympathy. "You look terrible," she says. "You should see the other village," you reply. She snorts and hands you a piece of roasted turnip. Mob football might not appear in any noble chronicles. It doesn't come with trophies or rules or gentle commentary. But for a brief, glorious day, it makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. A mess. A family. a riotous, mud-smeared miracle. And if you limp for a week, well, that's just part of the game. You can't lift your arms above your shoulders this morning. Your legs feel like they've been stomped on by every ox in the village. You're not even sure whether that bruise on your side came from yesterday's mob football match or from the celebratory fall you took afterward when Marjorie jokingly pushed you into a haystack. It's the perfect time for archery practice. No, really, because the king said so. You don't get to skip it just because you're sore, or tired, or missing part of your left boot. Archery, in medieval England especially, isn't a hobby. It's a national requirement. The law is clear. Every able-bodied man between the ages of 15 and 60 must practice with a longbow on Sundays and feast days. That's you. Today is Sunday. The field, known affectionately and also legally as the butts, waits. You trudge out past the edge of the village where a few haphazard targets lean against piles of straw. The butts aren't glamorous. There are no banners fluttering or squires polishing your quiver. Just a worn patch of land, a few smirking neighbors, and the knowledge that if you don't hit the target, someone will mock you about it all winter. You notch an arrow, draw back the bow, and feel your shoulder muscles scream. The string creaks. You release. It hits the ground 5 feet short. Someone claps sarcastically. Probably Cedric. You tell yourself you'll trip him later. Still, you try again, and again, and slowly, your aim improves. That's the thing with the bow. It demands patience, discipline, biceps, and more than a little masochism. The longbow, your weapon of choice, requires a draw strength of 80 to 100 pounds. Using it regularly literally reshapes your skeleton. Archaeologists have found the warped bones of longbowmen, their spines and shoulders permanently altered by years of practice. Fun. Historians still debate how effective this civilian archery program really was. Did the average peasant become a skilled killer? Or did most just flail around like you're doing now, hoping to hit somewhere near the straw? Well, ask the French. Specifically, ask the French soldiers at the Battle of Crécy in 1346, where English archers, peasants just like you, helped obliterate a numerically superior force while suffering only minimal losses themselves. Turns out, when enough village folk get together and shoot in vaguely the same direction, it really does make a difference. Of course, the government was constantly paranoid that people weren't practicing enough. Laws were passed to ban other activities that might distract men from their archery. Football, dice games, even tennis, all discouraged. In fact, a statute in 1363 mandated that every able-bodied man in the kingdom must have a bow of his own height and spend every Sunday practicing, rain or shine. You're not sure which is worse, the aching draw or the compulsory cheerfulness of your neighbor Alan, who insists on whistling while he shoots. And yet, there's something calming about it. The rhythm, the pull, the soft thud of an arrow hitting its mark. Well, eventually hitting its mark. You find yourself slipping into a strange focus. The world narrows. The fields go quiet. Even the chickens seem impressed. Marjorie wanders over at one point, watching your form with crossed arms. "Your elbow's too high," she says, snatching the bow from your hands. She draws it back with practiced ease, looses, and strikes the target dead center. You blink. "Since when do you shoot?" "Since I realized no man in this village can hit a tree from 10 paces. She hands the bow back and walks away, leaving behind a trail of smug silence and one very clean bullseye. You practice for another hour. By the end, your fingers are raw, your back is screaming, but at least 2 2 of your arrows have made it into something that could technically be called the target. 1 hit a chicken coop. 1 grazed Cedric's boot. You count them both. You trudge back into the village sore but satisfied. You may never see a battlefield. You may never stand shoulder to shoulder in a line of archers raining death upon armored knights. But if someone ever needs a barn defended from 20 paces, you might, just might, be their guy. Later, in the tavern, Cedric shows off a new bruise and blames you. Someone hands you a mug of weak ale. The fire crackles. You rub your fingers, already stiffening from the strain, and wonder, is this what strength feels like? Or just early arthritis? Marjorie passes by your table. "Keep practicing," she says, not looking at you. "You'll hit something important eventually. Probably not the target. But maybe her attention. That counts." The sun dips low, casting a golden haze over the village rooftops, and you follow the warm pull of candlelight and laughter toward the alehouse. Your arms are sore from archery, your tunic still damp from yesterday's football fiasco, and you've somehow managed to collect hay in places hay really shouldn't go. But you've got a few pennies jingling in your belt, and a strong desire to sit down with something that burns a little on the way down. You duck under the low lintel of the alehouse, where the air is thick with wood smoke, sweat, and fermented something. The benches are packed. There's a pig under one of the tables. The barmaid is already yelling. In short, it's perfect. Tonight, though, you're not just here for ale. You're here to gamble. Because nothing says evening relaxation like wagering away what little money, dignity, or warm outerwear you own on a game of dice. You settle in beside a crooked-toothed man named Henry, who may or may not have a second family in the next village over, and Cedric, who still blames you for his bruised foot. On the table between you lies the ancient centerpiece of medieval fun. 2 dice, crudely carved from animal bone. They're worn smooth at the edges, their pips faded from years of use and abuse, or clever tampering. The game tonight is hazard, a chaotic, high-stakes precursor to craps. The rules, depending on who's explaining them, are either quite simple or wildly contradictory. Everyone pretends to understand. No one actually does. That's part of the fun. You roll 3 dice. If you hit a main total, typically between 5 and 9, you get to keep playing. Then you try to roll that same number again to win. Anything else is a loss, or a partial win, or a throw again. Historians still argue whether the rules of hazard were truly standardized or just changed depending on how much ale the players had consumed. You're not even sure what you just rolled, but everyone at the table groans except Henry, who grins suspiciously and scoops up your coin. You narrow your eyes at the dice. Something's not right. Recently, clever archaeologists X-rayed similar medieval dice and discovered tiny bits of mercury embedded inside, weighted, tricked. It seems cheating at dice is as old as the game itself, and right now, you're almost positive these dice are betraying you. You pick them up, weigh them in your palm. Henry sips his ale innocently. Cedric chuckles. You roll again. Double 6s. A cheer erupts. Maybe the dice like you after all. Or maybe Henry realizes he's been caught and is giving you this one. Either way, you're 2 pennies richer and exactly 0% more confident in your understanding of hazard. The dice pass around the table. Stories spill between rolls. Who kissed who after apple bobbing, who got their tunic set on fire during yesterday's match, who's planning to sneak into the Lord's orchard after dark. You hear rumors that Big Martin was caught painting his sheep to sell them twice. Typical. There's a rhythm to it all. The clatter of bone on wood, the groans and cheers, the splash of refilled mugs. Dice games aren't just about winning. They're about letting off steam. They're a kind of communion, with fewer prayers and more shouting. You learn other games too. One just involves betting on whether a rat will run left or right when released. Another requires tossing a coin and guessing which way it'll land, except the coin is a flat piece of pewter and lands sideways half the time. But hazard is the king of them all, sanctioned even by nobility, though not officially, of course. Kings gambled, queens gambled. Even church officials rolled the bones now and then, though they were quick to condemn it afterward in sermons that sounded suspiciously like sore loser speeches. At one point in the evening, a peddler wanders in, drenched from the rain, and joins your table with a new set of dice. He claims they're carved from boar tusk and blessed by a monk. You suspect they're just whittled chicken bones dipped in soot. Still, he wins 3 games in a row before anyone notices the pips on one die are all odd numbers. The barmaid confiscates them, declares herself the winner, and everyone agrees it's a fair outcome. By now, you've lost your coin winnings, but gained a half loaf of slightly stale bread, a wooden whistle, and a bruise on your hip from someone's enthusiastic chair leap. You call that a net positive as the candles burn lower and Cedric falls asleep face down in a bowl of onion stew. You lean back against the wall and let your eyes drift half closed. The buzz of voices washes over you. The fire crackles. Someone's humming a tune you half remember from a midsummer feast. The dice sit silent now, resting after another night of chaos. You smile to yourself. You might not be rich or clean or entirely sure you'll still have all your teeth by winter, but you're entertained. You're surrounded. And somewhere under the table, that pig is snoring. Another evening well spent. You're beginning to suspect that medieval recreation is less about rest and more about finding ever more creative ways to risk your limbs. This suspicion only grows stronger when, the very next afternoon, someone shouts, "Let's play Skittles," and a large wooden ball nearly takes off your kneecaps. Skittles, as it turns out, is medieval bowling, but with fewer rules, more splinters, and at least one person yelling instructions no one understands. You're pulled into a game on the green, where 9 stout pins, just crooked lumps of turned wood, are arranged in a vague triangle. The ball, if you can call it that, is made of dense timber. Sometimes it's rounded, sometimes vaguely oval, and once someone insists on using a cheese wheel. Not metaphorically. A literal, round, aging lump of cheddar. They call it cheddar thunder. You step up, cradle the ball, and aim. The pins stare back at you like judgmental little monks. You roll. The ball veers dramatically to the left, hits a goose, and causes a brief but spirited chase. The goose is fine. Probably. "Close enough," someone shouts. You laugh, shake out your arm, and try again. This time, you knock down 3 pins and nearly knock down Alan, who was retrieving his mug. A solid improvement. Skittles is popular all over England, and the rules shift from shire to shire. In some places, you only get 2 throws. In others, you keep going until you've spilled all the pins or lose interest. In a few villages, the tradition is to shout an insult about someone's mother with every throw. That might just be your village, though. Historians still argue whether Skittles evolved independently or borrowed elements from Roman lawn games, Viking strength contests, or simply the human instinct to throw something heavy at something upright and see what happens. Either way, you love it. It's simple, noisy, and doesn't require you to memorize weird rules or risk being gored by livestock. That makes it a top-tier pastime, but then someone suggests Colf. You've heard of it, but never played. It's a Dutch import, supposedly, an ancestor of golf, but a much rougher cousin. The goal? Hit a small leather ball toward a target with a club. Doesn't sound too bad, until you realize that the target is usually the side of a building or, in one case, a sleeping pig. And the playing field is the village. You take up a long stick. Someone hands you a ball that looks suspiciously like a bundled rag, and you're pointed toward the midwife's house, which someone has designated as the hole. You swing. The ball sails beautifully, straight into the apothecary's shutters. Oops. You wince. There's a crash, then silence, then yelling. Everyone runs. By the time you stop for breath, you're crouched behind a hedgerow, clutching your club and laughing so hard it hurts. Someone else, probably Cedric, is still sprinting down the lane with his arms flailing. You figure it's best to wait before you try another round. Colf is dangerous, unpredictable, and hilariously satisfying. It's especially popular in towns with lots of open land, but in tight villages like yours, the hazards include passing sheep, cranky nuns, and the occasional chicken coop. Several windows are already cracked. One game last winter resulted in the village bell ringer falling off his ladder. He forgave you, eventually. But Colf adapts with the seasons. When winter comes and the rivers freeze solid, someone always has the bright idea. Why not play on the ice? And suddenly, the game becomes even more absurd. Players slide after their balls, slipping and careening across the frozen surface like drunken eels in boots. Precision is nearly impossible. The wind cuts through your cloak. Your fingers go numb gripping the club. And yet, there's joy in it. Chaos. Camaraderie. Some historians trace Colf's icy version to a kind of proto-hockey. Others claim it was its own unique blend of golf and slapstick comedy. But all agree, it was popular. From the peasantry to the urban middle class, people couldn't get enough of smacking a ball across frozen ponds while trying not to crack their skulls open. You're pretty sure the bruises on your hip are new, but your laughter's louder than the ache. Even Marjorie played last week, nearly knocking a duck off the ice. She denies it, but the duck definitely remembers. Later, warming yourself by the fire, you nurse a scraped knee and a bruised pride. Skittles you can handle. Colf? That's another beast entirely. But you'll play again. They always do. And honestly, compared to what you've heard about tomorrow's entertainment, something involving bears, you'd happily bowl cheese and shatter windows every day of the week. The next morning, there's a strange hum in the air. Not the usual clamor of carts and hens, nor the off-key lute practice from Alan's overly confident cousin. This is something deeper, heavier. An anticipatory buzz that draws people from their homes like moths to something they probably shouldn't be flying toward. You follow the crowd. Everyone's headed toward the southern edge of the village, past the thatched cottages and leaning fences, to an open space near the riverbank. There's a wooden platform there now, crudely assembled overnight, and a thick iron post rising from its center. A chain rattles. A dog barks. A cheer erupts from somewhere up front. Welcome to bear baiting. You'd hoped this was one of those stories villagers told to scare children or tourists from the next shire over. But no, it's real. And it's happening. Right here. Right now. At first, you think the bear might just be a very large cow. But then it moves, slowly, powerfully. Its head swings, jaws parted just enough to flash yellowed teeth. A thick chain runs from its collar to the post, taut and trembling. The bear's fur is matted and patchy, its eyes dull but watchful. You feel something twist in your stomach. And then come the dogs. Not one, not two, a dozen, barking, snarling, leaping toward the ring. A man in a leather apron holds them back, barely. When the horn sounds, he lets go. The dogs launch forward. What follows is not a sport. It's not even a contest. It's a brutal, shrieking display of teeth, claws, and the kind of entertainment that makes you question your entire species. The bear rears up, swats one dog clean across the ring. Another latches onto its leg. Another bites at its neck. The crowd roars with delight, like it's watching a puppet show. Someone waves a flag with a painted bear's head. Someone else sells mead from a cart. A few nobles sit under a canopy nearby, sipping from silver cups like this is a staged drama, not a living nightmare. You want to look away, but you don't. Historians still argue why bear baiting became such a prominent entertainment fixture. Some suggest it's a leftover from Roman blood sports. Others claim it was an outlet for aggression, a spectacle to remind people of man's dominion over nature. Whatever the reason, it's wildly popular, from paupers to princes. Dedicated bear pits spring up in towns across England, especially along the Thames and Bankside. Whole industries rise around it. Breeders of baiting dogs, trainers, arena builders, handlers. Some bears even become celebrities. You hear names whispered: Blind Bess, Three-Legged Thomas, George Stone. They have reputations, battle records, and, horrifyingly, fans. One man brags about seeing Blind Bess take down 8 dogs in one go. Another claims he once saw a bear leap the chain and scatter the crowd. Probably an exaggeration. Hopefully. You spot Marjorie in the crowd, arms folded tightly, jaw clenched. She meets your eye and shakes her head. You both edge away from the ring. Why do they cheer? You ask her. She shrugs. Same reason they drink. Same reason they bet on chickens and throw dice with bones. Maybe they've just forgotten what it feels like to be scared by something not starving or taxed. She's not wrong. Fear, in this case, is a commodity. It's thrilling. It's shared. It's something you can leave behind when the show's over, unlike the rest of your life. The fight winds down. The bear slumps, breathing hard. Several dogs limp away, bleeding. The crowd claps. Some laugh. A child throws a flower toward the arena. You feel like throwing up. Later, in the alehouse, the event is recounted like a grand victory. Bets are settled. Arguments flare up about which dog had better form. Someone claims the bear bit off a tail. Someone else says the bear smiled. You're quiet. So is Marjorie. Not everyone hated it, of course. The crowd was huge. Even royalty was known to attend these events. Queen Elizabeth I had a private baiting arena built. King James II refused to allow Parliament to interfere with it. Shakespeare even referenced bear baiting in The Merry Wives of Windsor. It wasn't fringe, it was culture. Still, something inside you feels off. You'd rather go back to Colf and cheese throwing and even getting tackled into a mud hole during football. At least those bruises are yours. At least that chaos is shared. Tonight, you sit by the fire with a bit of bread in your thoughts. The crowd's laughter still echoes faintly in your ears. You wonder how long the bear's been performing. You wonder how long the crowd will remember today, probably until the next one. Maybe not even that long. You wonder if the bear ever dreams. Tomorrow, someone's already organizing a boat jousting match. That, at least, sounds safer. Relatively. The following day, perhaps as some strange act of collective guilt, or maybe just boredom, the village agrees to tone things down a bit. No bear baiting, no broken limbs, no blood on the straw. Instead, today's entertainment will be jousting. But of course, you're a peasant. You don't own a horse, and you certainly don't own armor. Your helmet, if you even had one, would probably be a bucket with eye holes. The nobility can keep their noble steeds and velvet saddle blankets. You, however, have something better. You have a boat. Welcome to water jousting, the people's version of the nobleman's sport, but with more splinters, soggier socks, and an impressive potential for drowning. You head to the river, where a flotilla of mismatched rowboats awaits. Some are barely holding together. One's a repurposed laundry tub. Another has a suspicious crack patched with wool. But spirits are high. The sun glints off the water. The banks are crowded with villagers shouting bets and insults. A pig on a leash squeals in anticipation. Teams form quickly. Most boats have 3 or 4 rowers, and one unfortunate soul perched at the prow with a long wooden pole. The jouster. That's you, of course. Cedric volunteered you while your mouth was full of turnip. You stand, wobbling slightly, in the front of the boat. You're armed with a straight pole about as long as your neighbor's goat shed, carved yesterday from a broken fence post. There's no armor, just a cushion strapped to your chest with twine, which someone cheerfully refers to as your lance sponge. Opposite you, in another bobbing vessel, stands your opponent, Big Martin, shirtless, wearing a cooking pot on his head like a proud tin knight. He's already shouting threats and flexing muscles that may or may not be bread-induced hallucinations. The signal is given, a whack of a stick on a kettle, and your rowers launch into action, paddling frantically. The boat jerks forward, water sloshing in over the sides. You try to balance, pole extended, knees shaking like saplings in a storm. The 2 boats lurch toward each other, swerving unpredictably. Yours lists heavily to the left. Big Martin's crew overcorrects and smacks into a floating barrel. It's chaos on water. And then, you're close. You thrust the pole as best you can, aiming for something vaguely torso-shaped. It hits, sort of. Martin doesn't fall, but he does stumble. His boat rocks wildly, and then, spectacularly, it tips. There's a splash, a cheer, and a very large man disappears beneath the river. Victory! Your crew erupts in laughter. Someone nearly drops an oar. Martin surfaces a moment later, sputtering and swearing, and immediately starts planning the rematch. That's how it goes. Match after match. The boats grow leakier, the poles get dented. More than one jouster goes flying face first into the muddy shallows. At one point, the priest gets hit by a stray paddle and declares divine judgment on water sports, just before being knocked in himself by a rower named Agnes, who swears it was an accident. Historians still debate where water jousting originated. Some trace it back to southern France, where it became surprisingly refined with actual wooden platforms built onto the boats. Others say it spread organically through Europe, wherever people had rivers and a bit too much free time. In your village, it's equal parts pageantry and nonsense. But it's not just summer sport, because when winter arrives and the river freezes solid, the boats go into storage, and the jousting evolves. Someone gets the bright idea to take the same poles and use them on ice. It's hard to say who tried it first. Probably someone with poor balance and an impressive disregard for personal safety. You suspect Cedric. Skaters strap carved bones to their feet using twisted leather cords. These skates don't glide so much as scrape, but they work. sort of. And that's enough. Because now it's not just jousting on boats, it's ice jousting. You don't even have time to question it before you're shoving off across the frozen surface, spear in hand, heart in your throat. The ice groans beneath your feet. Wind howls in your ears. Marjorie, of course, is already halfway across the river, standing perfectly still and daring you to try her. You gain speed, knees bent, pole extended. Everything is going well until crack. Your left skate hits a chunk of frozen dung. You fly. Time slows. The sky spins. Your pole soars into the air like a javelin. Then, whoomp. You land flat on your back, breath stolen, dignity gone. The crowd roars. Someone throws a cabbage in appreciation. Ice jousting becomes the winter event. Everyone plays. Everyone falls. There are bruises, twisted ankles, and the occasional trip through thin ice. But no one dies. Mostly. Probably. It's dangerous. It's absurd. It's cold. And yet it's wonderful. Because it's yours. You and your fellow villagers, inventing fun out of whatever's lying around. Wood scraps, frozen rivers, patched boats, or goat cheese wheels. No gold, no titles, no perfect technique. Just joy. Muddy, soggy, half-frozen joy. The air bites deeper now, sharper with each passing morning. The fields have long since hardened. The goats walk stiff-legged through frost-bitten grass, and the village well requires a hammer to crack the surface. But the cold hasn't slowed your neighbors. If anything, it's energized them with the unspoken challenge. How ridiculous can we get before spring? And so, as if Colf and ice jousting weren't enough, someone suggests skating races, then trick skating, then jousting on skates, and somehow, inevitably, combat. You lace your feet with bone skates carved from the remains of old oxen. Smooth and oily, they're strapped to your boots with leather thongs and prayers. These aren't modern skates with edges and precision. These are curved, flattened bones that glide, or don't, depending on the ice and your luck. They creak when you move. They whisper of splinters. But they work. Out on the river, a crowd gathers. The surface glints with pale afternoon light, marbled with cracks and smoothed by days of sliding feet. Somewhere, a drum thumps. Someone shouts the names of participants, and then, yes, Marjorie skates by, pole in hand, scarf trailing behind her like a battle flag. You take your place at one end of the ice. Across from you, Cedric grins, already wobbling slightly. Neither of you is built for grace. But that's never stopped anyone here. The signal is a lad banging a ladle against a frozen turnip. You push off. Immediately, your right foot slips and you overcorrect, arms windmilling. You regain balance just in time for Cedric to charge toward you like a sled with legs. His pole swings low. You duck, scrape forward, and slide into a clump of snow that cushions your fall with a frosty thud. Ice jousting isn't about precision. It's not even really about winning. It's about trying. Trying to stay upright. Trying not to scream as your ribs meet the ice. Trying to whack your friend with a glorified stick before they whack you first. And yet, something magical happens. You find your rhythm. You lean with your knees. The skates, crude as they are, begin to cooperate. You glide, not well, but fast. And with that momentum comes courage. You lunge. Cedric yelps. Your pole clips his shoulder. He spins. He falls. A cheer erupts. Maybe for you, maybe for him. Doesn't matter. Historians still argue whether bone skating in medieval times was sport, survival, or some practical Norse import gone rogue. They know Finland and parts of Scandinavia used bone skates as early as 1800 BCE, mostly to glide over frozen lakes in winter. But somewhere between practicality and boredom, It became play. And then jousting. You skate past Marjorie, who smirks and mutters something about your form. You salute with your pole and promptly trip over your own skate, spinning out with a half squeak and a glorious belly flop. Dignity, 0. Style, 10. She offers you a hand, pulls you up and says, "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." You reply, "Thank you." By midday, the ice is littered with discarded scarves, snapped sticks, and the occasional stunned goose. People warm their fingers over small fires at the edges. Someone's dog has claimed a corner as its personal throne and refuses to move. And someone, probably Alan, is trying to combine dice rolling with skating. It goes about as well as expected. The sun sinks early, casting orange across the glassy river. One last match, one last round. You take your place again, aching, bruised, and filled with something close to joy. This is survival too. Not from famine or war or winter's bite, but from boredom, from the heaviness of daily life. And so you skate, you fall, you get back up, you swing your stick, you laugh as night falls and the torches flicker, you limp back toward the village with the others. Your hands are raw, your thighs may never recover, but your spirit, giddy. The snow crunches underfoot. You pass the frozen trough where apple bobbing once ruled, the field where you tackled your neighbors during football, the pub where you rolled rigged dice and won a loaf of bread, the field where arrows flew, the meadow where the bear stood chained, the river, now a stage. You've played, you've bruised, you've survived, and for a moment, you realize something strange. It's not just about fun. It's about meaning, about finding laughter amid hardship, about taking cold, mud, and fear and turning it into stories, into games, into scraped knees and sore ribs, and that feeling when your heart races, not from hunger, but from momentum. You pause at your door. Inside, warmth, soup, a lumpy bed. Behind you, a trail of footprints and laughter that hasn't quite faded yet. You smile, bone skates in hand. This was a good winter. And spring is coming. You settle under your blanket, limbs heavy, thoughts softened by memory. The echoes of laughter still drift across your mind. The splash of apple water, the thud of a football match, the scrape of bone skates on frozen rivers. One by one, they begin to blur together, like stars fading into the soft gray of dawn. The air is still. The fire crackles low. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then quiets. Your muscles hum with the pleasant ache of a day well spent, of a season lived with mud on your boots and cold wind in your lungs. You remember the feel of the wooden pole in your hand, the wobble of the boat, the sting of cold water on your skin. You remember the blur of dice on a sticky table, the roar of a crowd watching something they shouldn't, the hush that follows a perfect shot into a straw target. You remember Marjorie's smirk, Cedric's fall, the sound of your own breath as you slid across the ice and into a pile of snow. And now, slowly, gently, it all drifts away. Let it. Let the silliness and scrapes melt into quiet. Let your heart beat slow. Let your breath grow long and steady. The river is frozen. The games are done. The stars above are cold and clear. And you, dear listener, have survived another day in medieval shoes with all the chaos, courage, and charm that life could offer. Rest now. There's always tomorrow, and maybe another tournament. But for tonight, sleep.